Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining in to the Pastor's Roundtable. I'm Steve Book. I was privileged to serve this past weekend as the preacher here at Faith Community. With us, of course, is Senior Pastor Craig Michelson, Rev, and Pastor Bob. And we so appreciate when you send questions into us relative to the sermon, or in, I think in one case, we have one from last week's, do we not, or a couple times ago. So thanks so much for joining in and certainly for sharing this time together. I believe Pastor Craig is we're going right to the starting pitcher, right to the senior pastor for number one here.
Well, first of all, thanks for preaching. Whenever you preach here, it's a real blessing for many. So we're glad you're in the rotation with us, the pitching rotation, to use your analogy. So here's question number one. When I look at how busy everyone is, I'm concerned about two areas where I'm not sure when or how it's appropriate to offer advice. That's definitely a big challenge that many of us face. The first area is family. The second is at work. I see people overcommitting themselves, and it's clearly taking a toll in several areas. There are spaces fraught with landmines. How would you proceed? Yeah, that can get really touchy, especially if we're talking with a family member or maybe a close friend, obviously a coworker too. I just want to share a few principles, I guess. It's hard to specifically answer for a situation, but maybe some principles that might be helpful. And one is that we certainly do need to be aware of what pressures in our society and what pressures we put on ourselves that can cause us to live our lives out of balance, where our priorities and our perspective can get out of order. So being aware of that, praying for wisdom. There are times where it's best if we're not the person to give someone else advice because they may never listen to us, but there may be times where we are able to, a door might open. So pray for wisdom there, and also pray that God would bring other people into their lives who could potentially share that same advice, but for whatever reason, they would be more open to listening to advice from them. I find there are things oftentimes that parents deal with their children where they can give advice to their kids and it's totally ignored. But if a teacher or a friend's parents give the same advice, all of a sudden it's like this genius statement that's been made, and we just shake our heads and thank God that someone else could get through to them. So you never know who God might use. It's important that our advice is caught before it's taught. In other words, we want to make sure we practice what we preach, because unless people see this advice we're giving to them being carried out in our lives, I don't think they're going to be too willing to listen either. So if we can model a balanced life, and it sounds like that's part of the problem here, if we can balance a modeled life, that might make people more open to seeking a better alternative than what they're dealing with. Teachable moments. I like that phrase because it seems like while there are important regular opportunities for us to teach, and especially teach the faith, there are times where we need to wait for those teachable moments, because if the other person comes to us wondering, for instance, how can you not be so stressed out and overwhelmed this time of the year like I am? Well, that opens the door then for you to be able to respond to how God gives you the balance and the perspective. Sometimes those teachable moments are the only times when somebody might be open to your sharing advice. So it's important to watch for those and ask for God to guide you in that area as well. We also need to be honest. If that teachable moment does open up and we have an opportunity to have a positive conversation about one of these areas, we should be honest and first of all share where we've struggled in the same ways and how God has helped us then to be able to move beyond that, and that could be exactly what somebody's looking for. So just some practical things. I hope that helps. I know it can be very difficult at times when we're dealing with those situations and we see what it's doing to somebody. We want to offer advice, but we also know that can be very tricky. So I hope this will help, and God will provide you the guidance to be able to do that.
Thanks, Pastor Craig. I think for question 2, we're going to Pastor Bob.
Let's see. I'd like to learn more about how Jesus took rest, especially sleep. It seems that with his days full and his rest in prayer with his Father, there wasn't much time for sleep. I know prayer brings comfort and rest, but as humans, we also need adequate sleep. We can't pray instead of sleep. Whatever Jesus' model was or is, seems like it's a good one to follow. I completely agree. In fact, I have a T-shirt that says, Jesus took naps, and I'm trying to be like Jesus. I think it's important that in this question, we reflect on the fact that the Gospels are not biographies. And so Jesus certainly did sleep. We know that he was a human. He hungered, he thirsted, he bled, he died. And so we know that he was fully human, and therefore he did take rest. You brought up a great example in the sermon about Jesus calming the storm. In fact, the T-shirt that my sister gave me that has that quote on that quotes the scripture where it says, "And leaving the crowd, he went with him on the boat just as he was. The other boats were with him, and a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat so that the boat was already filling, and he was in the stern asleep on a cushion." And so we certainly do know that he took rest. In this instance, in Mark, what I think is instructive to us is that Jesus here is an example of being a faithful disciple, in that he, trusting in God, could even sleep during a storm. And so Jesus is the example of a faithful follower or who trusts in God par excellence. But also, it's important to note that at the end of this account in Mark, that the disciples not only see Jesus as an example, but that they see him as the object of faith when he calmed the storm, just as he demonstrated that he was God with us, from like Psalm 107, 28, and 29, where it says, God commands the storms to cease, and they cease. And so when Jesus did that, they saw him as God with us. So Jesus is not only the example of faith, but he is also the object of faith. And so when it comes in terms of Jesus resting and taking sleep, the Gospels, not being biographies, wouldn't give us every detail, but we certainly know that he did and that he was human. And we can learn from Jesus in taking a Sabbath, because Jesus, who was God from all eternity and Trinity, participated in the Sabbath, the very first one, on the seventh day of creation, commanding us as humans to appreciate that Sabbath that God had created. So, I don't know, does that make sense? Or
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And number 3 is directed right at me, so I'm going to take this, of course. I love your commitment to a Sabbath from your phone and work. After that conversation with the pastor, what else did you decide to prioritize in your Sabbath? He told me what to do, and I did it. And he said, I want you to spend time with your wife. He just threw out, like, if you like driving around, why don't you guys just take a drive on, in my case, Sunday mornings, because we typically, Julie and I go to church on Saturday night. And we have a little 2007 Pontiac Solstice convertible. It's worth $2,000. Don't get your hopes up. And we have found on Sunday mornings, we'll get a coffee. We used to always just get a coffee. Now that there's a Randy's Donuts right on Charleston, we get some big cinnamon rolls with our coffee. We put the top down. We'll do Red Rock. My wife grew up on the east side of town, which we don't spend a lot of time over there. We'll drive through the east side of town. We'll drive through D Street, right, some of those neighborhoods. We'll drive into North Las Vegas. We've been to Henderson, Lake Las Vegas. We just take drives, and we just get to know the neighborhood. We drive around the west side, too, because there's plenty of areas in Summerlin that we don't do. So that accomplishes 2 things. It allows me to strengthen my marriage and spend time with the person I love more deeply than anyone on the face of the earth, and it just gives us some alone time. We learn a little bit about the town, and because I'm driving, I'm absolutely not on my phone. I try to discipline myself in that 24-hour period on Sundays, but that was an example that he threw out, and I said, I love to drive, and I love my wife. That's perfect. So Julie and I look forward, at least for an hour and a half or so of us just driving around together and spending time together.
You want to know what Kevin Oder's advice was to me when he first met with me in a similar kind of setting? Okay. This was shortly after I got here to Las Vegas, and he said to me, the Titanic in Las Vegas has already sunk. We're just a bunch of lifeboats trying to save as many people as we can.
That's good.
In other words, we're not here. We're not competing with each other.
No,
there are plenty of lost souls to go around. We just
him.
need to be lifeboats out there saving as many as we can. So
That's
I thought
awesome.
that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Good guy. Question 4. Are we back to you hitting in the 4 hole?
Let's see.
Wow, that's the cleanup hitter. Number 4. Bases are juiced.
That's usually what he does. He cleans up after our
the mess.
Not at all.
Our messes.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm certainly guilty of not finding time for God. And even when I do, it's often not fully dedicated. I think it's about making God your heart's priority number 1. desiring that time and looking forward to it. A few years ago, I had a professor who asked our class for help the next Saturday at 7 a.m. No one responded. He then said it came with a $100 bill for the first 10, and suddenly all hands went up. Everyone's priority changed and schedules opened up. The motivation changed because of the reward. Can we change our desire and attitude toward time with God in a similar way? Only if, in the first part of the question where you say, I'm certainly guilty of not finding time for God. If you're trying to find time for God in the midst of all of your desires and motivations, you will fail 100% of the time. And so instead, we need to flip the focus to God found the time for us. And in finding time for us, God has given us. And from what God gives us, we are blessed. And when we see what he has done and what he has given us, then that allows us to reshape our understanding of time with God. And so for this, for me personally, I eat 3 times a day. And I never forget to do that, as is very clear by my corpulent nature. And I do that because it makes me healthy and I enjoy it, and it gives me energy, and all those kinds of things. And so I just thought to myself, I eat 3 times a day. I might as well spiritually partake or spiritually eat 3 times a day as well. And so what I do is whenever I'm eating, I'm spending time with the Lord. And so in the morning, that's when I have my first worship and devotion time. And then at noon, that's my second time, and that's usually some kind of devotion and catechism time. And then in the evening, I have worship and reading through the Bible in a year time. And so I do that 3 times a day. Do I sometimes forget to do a meal? Absolutely. Sometimes does my life get out of control and I have to skip a meal? For sure. But I do the same thing that I do when I skip a meal, which is I overindulge on the next meal. And so I spend even more time. And so that's how my priority with eating is my priority with being with God and his word. Now, everybody's devotion is going to look a little bit different, because we tend to think that devotion is a noetic experience. I'm sitting in a room next to a lamp with a cup of coffee and a Bible, But that's only one type of devotion, and it's actually a very narrow definition, possibly too narrow of a definition. David Schmidt says that devotion is contemplative and practical exercises centered on a teaching of the faith that informs your practice and life. And what that means is you can actually focus in on a teaching of the faith in such a way that you spend your whole day focusing on it. Say if you were contemplating your devotion as a mother, then you can begin the day with the word, a teaching of the faith about being a mother that gives you strength. You put that in your pocket the whole day, and as you're taking care of your children or taking care of your responsibilities in that vocation, all of those activities together with the word and the praying that you're certainly doing if you're a mother, all of that is devotion, which means that, to your reference of pray without ceasing, it's not so much about doing one specific activity, but it's about understanding your vocation under the reign and rule of God as a continuous devotion to the teachings of the faith and contemplative and practical exercises. And so the reason why I do mine the way I do is because I preach and teach the word. And so that's why I'm in the word so much. And I commit myself to public worship, and so that's why I have worship components in mine. But that's just because I'm a pastor. But everybody's might look different. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mine looks different.
Yeah, it does.
Yours look like.
When I'm eating, I'm reading the sports page. Every meal.
You're devoted to the sports page.
But I actually see him devote himself to the word when he's in his treasury of daily prayer or for all the saints. Yeah, and I see Pastor Craig doing the same with his through the church year with the fathers and the daily lectionary, and I'm sure you have much the same thing. And so, whereas yours might not look like eating, mine does, and that's okay.
Yeah, and some people now, they have it online, which
or
is
the
really
phone.
cool. There's so many apps and stuff that can be used, so that's really helpful. Yeah.
Number 5, Craig, I think you said you had an example for this one.
I'll start it, but
Yeah.
I'm guessing we all
Yeah.
can chime in on this one, okay? Do any of you see Jesus getting your attention like he did with Martha in the reading? How does he snap you into awareness, and then how does he let you know what's next? So I guess the first example that comes to my mind is when I was in my first year at the seminary, taking classes full-time. Amy and I were working full-time and taking care of a retirement facility with 76 units. And so it was a very, very busy time in our lives. And so I was busy doing all this stuff, serving the Lord and in preparation for pastoral ministry. But that was taking time away from me. And so that first year, I came down with the Asian flu and double pneumonia. And so I was down for 3 months and then started up again and then got pneumonia again. And so that first year was a time where about all I could do is just spend time in the Word and in prayer and just letting people care for me, which was really cool. All of a sudden we had a whole bunch of grandparents in that building that were all taking care of us. So that would be one. I've had pneumonia since then. I've had a back surgery and a knee surgery. And of course, the time that you spend doing nothing but waiting to heal, those are good times too for me. I feel like those times where I think I've had 3 major surgeries, and like with the pneumonia, those have been the best spiritual times for me because you just can focus on the Lord and be still. You're forced to. So,
I'm really glad you mentioned that because now I'm thinking back to it was 15 years ago when I had my first hip replacement. I knew I was going to be out for 2 weeks, and I had committed myself because I'd never read the Bible literally cover to cover that time, and it's exactly what I did that first time. And it was just really because you're down. You're not moving. You're not going to work, and so thank you. The other thing I wanted to add is and I was telling Pastor Craig this on Sunday, I spend more, a lot of us do who work 40 hours. We spend more waking hours at work than we do at home, and so I have found that if my Bible is on my desk at school, the odds of me reading it increase 100-fold. Or if it's just on my shelf, I don't see it. If it's on my desk, I think to get in the Word. Right now, the Pacific Southwest District just sent all teachers a little Advent devotional. It's right next to my phone. I see it every day, and I read the daily devotion because maybe God's prompted me to say, hey, you're too stupid to remember to actually grab it off the shelf, so stick it in front of you, and then it becomes a reminder for me, there it is, this is awesome, and I'll spend some time in it. So
Good.
A little trick of mine.
Yeah.
Probably for me, what Martha did in that story is she noticed Mary, and that's how the Lord got her attention. And so sometimes I will think of the examples of the saints, or I'll think of the examples of the fathers, or sometimes I'll see the example in good Christians. I have this one Christian right now he texts me whenever he has a really great idea, and that just confronts me with my own Martha-ness as he is clearly sitting at the feet of Jesus. And so I think that's sometimes how the Lord gets a hold of me.
I believe I was the Lord's instrument in helping others get this point.
Yes, that's
when
right.
I was a professor at Concordia.
Oh, no, you're not going
At
to.
10:25 a.m., right
No.
before chapel, I'd leave my office to head towards chapel. And,
Oh, my.
and because I was so self-righteous, I'd peek in at everybody else's office, and if they weren't going to chapel, I would just say, Martha, Martha. I mean, that's not bad what they were doing, but what I chose was better.
I thought you were going to tell the story about when you were Martha, or I was Martha and you were Mary.
Oh, that's right.
At
Whoa,
chapel.
At chapel,
Yes,
when
yes.
I had to
Oh, my.
fill in for you.
Yeah, he filled in for me at a chapel at Irvine.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, clearly I am Mary.
My heart was too busy for
That's
chapel.
really good.
That's really funny.
I love it. All right, Rev, I think we're going back to you.
All right.
On number 6 to wrap us up here.
Final batter.
Yeah.
A 6 batter way down. I was going to say, had a bad first half of the season. All right. Thanks for the answer to my question about Advent last week. I did think it was the start of Christmas season. Can you talk more about the church year and how the worship season goes? Yes, I just happened to have my notes from your class at you, if you recall that.
Right, I do.
First of all, the church year kind of helps us get the rhythm of our Christian living, and it can be divided into 2 halves, first of all. The first beginning with Advent, so we just started the new church year, and it ends at Ascension. And during that time, we focus on the life and teaching of Jesus. And then the second half of the church year begins Pentecost and goes up to Advent, and that's the long season, what I call the green season, or the green mile of the church, church season. And that focuses upon the growth and life of the church. So that's the two halves. Then you can break it down further, mostly in the first half. Advent is the first season, and sometimes the colors help us understand the significance. Usually the color for Advent is blue. It's a color of hope, also the color of Michigan. During Christmas...
Different kind of blue.
I'm sorry. It's a color... Okay, sorry.
Yellow one.
Then Christmas, it's the white is a color. It's a color of purity and holiness. Epiphany, we usually go green, but actually I found out the real color is yellow because the emphasis is on manifestation or the light and radiance. And Lent is purple. It's a color of repentance. Good Friday, black, color of sorrow and death. And Easter is white, again, color of purity and holiness. Pentecost is red, also the color of Alabama, who will be beat by Michigan. And the time of the church, is green, a sign of growth. I like to throw these words in to help us understand the seasons. For Advent, it's anticipation. For Christmas, it's celebration. For Epiphany, it's manifestation. For Lent, it's preparation. For Easter, it's culmination. For Pentecost, it's initiation. And for the church year, for the church, it's maturation.
Wow,
Das ist alles.
very well done.
See, that's the good stuff.
Oh, man.
That's the good stuff.
The only thing you neglected was a green for the Packers, who beat the Chiefs.
That's right.
Somehow that
sorry.
just...
I don't know how
So-
that didn't get in there.
Yeah.
It's his first time.
Man. So do you have a
Can't
yellow
even.
stole
I can
for
go.
Epiphany?
I might get
I
one.
have.
This point,
Retirement
at
gift.
this late point in your
For
life,
my retirement gift, can I have a stole?
do you have a yellow one?
I have one that I have a chasuble that's ivory and gold and green. So
Oh, okay, you
it's
got the
meant
gold,
to be
okay.
You can
All right.
cover all
Epiphany.
those seasons, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's meant to cover all of Epiphany, and I like doing Epiphany as white.
Okay,
Yeah, I
that's
do
what we
too.
do. Yeah.
Don't tell
That's
Sin.
usually what I do.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
have a stole that was made for me in the Philippines that's got all the colors.
Yeah,
Just
you got it all
stripes.
covered. Yeah.
So I can just wear it all the time if I want.
Yep.
Is it that woven one with the different block
Yep.
patterns?
Yep,
Okay.
I got that one, and then I got a green one and a black one.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Isn't that fun?
Who knew?
Neckerchiefs at church.
Well, hey, thanks again for joining us. We're especially honored by those of you that took the time to send questions. It's a great time of the church here. As Rev just explained to us, there'll be tons of worship opportunities for us to gather together in word and sacrament and worship our newborn King, Jesus Christ. So we're signing off for now. God's blessings, and have a very great week.